mentioned, I am really passionate about this topic because I really do believe that, as this stat says, nearly 1/3 of our lives is spent at work. I'm really passionate about helping people like yourself really have meaning and purpose in that work. I don't believe that we should live for the weekend and that 2/3 is the only area that we can express our passions and have a meaningful, impactful life, but our careers have the ability to do that, have the ability to grow us and stretch us and leave a really lasting impact on this planet. So one of the key aspects of being able to do that is being able to stand out in the job application process so that you really can be a little bit selective and choosy about which roles you're applying for, so that you can choose roles that play best to your strengths, play best to your passions. So I'd love to connect with you, so feel free to connect with me on any of these social networks, a variety of them. LinkedIn obviously is most professional, but as Juliana mentioned, I do share regular video tips on the recruitment process, how to level up your career on YouTube, as well as TikTok has been my most recent one, short little snappy videos on career advice, so that's been quite enjoyable too. I want to do, first off, get a bit of a poll for who is here and find out what situation you're currently in and how you've been going in the last 12 months, and find out how many jobs have you applied for in the last 12 months. So that poll will pop up. If you can just really quickly just jump in and select that poll number there. I'd be really curious to see how that process has been for you. I'm going to submit mine too. It'll just give me a better idea for who's in the room, what situation you're in. I'm aware that, you know, through 2020, the job market in Brisbane, as well as all across Australia, was really challenging and really tough. So once that's completed, that'll pop up on the screen. Oh yeah, there we go. Awesome. So 0, 42%. Awesome. 33, 5 to 10, and some 10 to 20. No one in 20 to 30. That's good. But yeah, really great to hear that. Thanks for letting me know that. I had another question that you can just add into the chat as well. So when I see these kind of responses through, I'll try and respond to them. But I wanted to ask you, if you're one of those people who's applied for, 5 to 10 roles, maybe had some phone interviews, maybe had some interviews, maybe accepted an offer recently, what have you found to be the most frustrating element of the recruitment process? And as mentioned, I'm a recruiter, so I'm constantly dealing with this all day. In part of my research for how to stand out, I found the best way to stand out and leave a lasting impression. So I couldn't summarize what this video says better than this video, so feel free to check this out. I'd love to debrief on this afterwards.
Okay, so what highest?
What's up?
Are you can you please not eat during our interview?
I'm not eating.
Okay. Because I mean this is a serious interview, so if you're not prepared to be serious during the interview, then we can't conduct this interview.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm not eating.
Okay, are you prepared to continue the interview?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what is your highest? All right, sir, we're gonna end this interview.
Oh, no, I'm not eating.
Are you eating with us?
Oh, no, I'm not eating.
Okay. All right, sir. All right, so
All right, so obviously, I don't know about you, I find this video hilarious. This guy does heaps of these trolling recruiters and people like me, hiring managers. So obviously he's going to leave a lasting impression in that recruiter's mind, but maybe not the right impression. So hence why we've got that tagline. Another really quick poll for you guys. What will give you the best chance for an interview or to get the job, to land the dream job? Number A is a really great cover letter or CV. B, additional education. C, an internal referral. D, a portfolio case study. Or E, something else entirely. Oh, don't worry about something else. That's not there. Actually, the order's a little bit different too. But quickly fill in this poll. I'd love to hear your thoughts here. And I'm going to move on to the next slide once you guys are working on that. The results will pop up as well for that in a moment. So I'm keen to hear feedback on that. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about is standing out from the applicant pool. And I'll just introduce this while we're waiting for those poll results. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is an applicant tracking system, or an ATS. And because an understanding of that will actually help you in your process as you're going through the journey, applying for jobs and getting through interview stages, being able to see what a recruiter like me sees on the other side of the desk. Number two, how to leverage a network. And number three, icing on the cake, the little bonus points, things you can do that'll really help leave a positive impression in the recruiter or hiring manager or business owner's mind. And those poll results are back. Can you guys all see those results as well, or is it just me? I think everyone can see those results. Is that... Sorry, can you guys see those results as well?
Yes, we can, Mark.
Yeah, great. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so almost split 50-50, but 46% said a really good cover letter and 54% an internal referral. Yeah, no one said additional education and no one said a portfolio case study. Yeah, really interesting thoughts there. Just my quick take on that one. I think 54% of you guys are right in terms of an internal referral. It is probably the top thing you can do to help you get that job. What I've seen in large corporate organizations like KPMG and many others is having an internal referral does really set you apart from the other applicants. But likely, yeah, very true in terms of those other points. A really great cover letter is really important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that additional case study portfolio as another additional tip. But let's keep moving on. So what is an ATS? Okay, let me see here. So I've just grabbed a screenshot of an example ATS. This isn't what I do. This isn't a job that I'm recruiting for. None of these are real people that I'm aware of. But this is just a good example to show you what a recruiter like me sees when they post a job ad up on LinkedIn and they see the applicants coming through. That will usually get sucked into something like an ATS, an applicant tracking system, that looks something like this. Here you can see it's quite a popular job, 256 total candidates in that pipeline. So sometimes when you're applying for jobs, sometimes you are applying up against nearly 300 other people. Other times, you can actually see on LinkedIn how many people have applied for a job. Depending on how the back end of that system works, it can be really inaccurate. I know for KPMG jobs, sometimes we have hundreds of applicants, but it still says there's only 5 people have applied because LinkedIn only counts what come in through LinkedIn, not through any other channels. But if you don't want to be in a large candidate pool, you can be a bit selective on LinkedIn and only apply for quite unpopular jobs potentially. But basically what I wanted to show you here is what the kind of view your name might represent at the very first stage of the recruitment process. When you click submit, when you click apply, you upload your CV, you go through that process, you get about 20 pixels here. You can see here for Caleb Poole, 20 pixels, all he gets to represent himself at the very first set, at the first glance snapshot of a recruiter. And in some cases, that's all he will get. So for this role, I don't even know what it is, but it's something to do with sales, obviously. Everyone in this candidate pool so far has sales. But if I saw, if there was something else in there that didn't have sales in the title that said, IT specialist, for instance, that could be enough for the recruiter to straight away just discount that person. And that's just off their most recent work experience. Also, you can see the location there. So they could do an initial filter and just filter out anyone who's not in Brisbane and automatically reject them. What else have they got here? A couple of other things there, but basically that's it. The name, current job title, location, and there might be as well like a working rights in Australia thing if you're applying for an Australian role. So what I wanted to just share and highlight that is this is the kind of view a recruiter sees. The next point is they might do an initial just quick screen through this initial list and just dismiss anyone that's not relevant that they could see initially. And then they'll probably take a deeper dive and actually click on the name, look at the CV. But then again, if you've got 256 candidates, the recruiter's goal is going to be to whittle that down really quickly to about 50 max. So they only have to review with their eyeballs 50 CVs because that's still quite a long process. Even if a recruiter only takes 5 seconds per CV, it's still quite a time-consuming process. So what they'll be doing is they'll click on a name, they'll open up the CV, they'll have a quick scan through, and then they'll skip next. And depending on what kind of applicant tracking system they're using, there might be like a traffic light system, like a red means no, dismiss. Yellow means maybe, green means yes, take forward to a phone screen or take forward to an interview. And they'll kind of go through and just quickly just bang, 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 go through this applicant tracking system. Now, what I wanted to share is how to escape an ATS. Because basically, if you're in that ATS, it's hard to get out of there. It's hard to stand out unless your CV hits exactly every single thing that they're looking for, unless the recruiter sees all that in the first 5 seconds of them reviewing your CV. It can be quite hard. My advice on how to escape the ATS is first thing to try and connect with the human, because the reality is it doesn't matter what job you're applying for, what company there is, there's going to be a human on the other end of that application who's going to want to see the CV and talk to you more. So what I'd advise is try and find on LinkedIn the human who's in HR or recruitment or the agency recruiter or whoever it is, and try and connect with them outside of the applicant tracking system. A really good excuse for doing that is, as was mentioned in the poll, having a case study, having a portfolio or something extra that goes along with your cover letter and your CV. While that's, it is additional work and that's not always easy, not always viable, sometimes having an excuse to reach out to someone is a better way of building a connection than just, finding them on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I'd love to apply. I'd love to connect with you. I applied for this job. Can I have some feedback? Did I get the job? Yes or no? If you instead can reach out to that recruiter and say, hey, I've applied for this job. I'm really interested in it. I wanted to share with you my case study about projects that I've managed that are really similar to what's required in this role, but I couldn't upload them because all I could upload was my CV and my cover letter. Can you share this with the hiring team, please? Then straight away, whether they actually share that with the hiring team or not, it's taken that name, your application out of the ATS and given another connection. They've got a document that they have to do something with. They can either load that into their system or send that on, but it basically gives another kind of touch point that you can connect with them on. Hopefully you can get a little bit of feedback there as well. So the next thing I would say on how to escape an ATS is to find a referral. That is the best way, is look at LinkedIn, research the company, and look for any kind of connections that you have with people in your network. Now, LinkedIn is worse than Facebook in terms of the connections that you have usually. Often you don't always know them, and that's totally okay if you haven't met people face to face, but you've still connected with them because you're in the industry or a company that you want to work at. It's totally okay to connect with those kind of people. Some people are totally open to it. Some people are a bit private and they don't like to do that, or they don't want to accept connections from anyone that they don't personally know, and that's okay as well. But if you do have connections that are at the same company that you're trying to get into, then try to utilize that. Even if it's the first time you're messaging them on LinkedIn, say, hey, we've been connected for a couple of months. I've loved being connected with you and seeing your content. I've applied for this job and would love any help in how I can best talk to the right person about this, or how I can share this document, or any feedback that you've had about your experience in that company. Is that all good? Are you guys okay? I'm not going too fast, am I? Everyone's still with me? Thanks for the guys who have their camera on too, by the way. I appreciate that. I know that I'm not just talking to blank faces. It's really great. The next thing I would say on this topic of how to stand out is leveraging your network. Now, let me just make sure I keep my notes on track. Be proactive about getting referrals. Yeah, I've already said that. Okay, one thing I did want to add in there is, depending on your situation, I know that, project management, the PMIQ covers quite a broad range of project management. So, say you're an IT project manager and you're just sick of working with IT issues and IT teams, and you're sick of working with developers, and you want to get into engineering project management or some other kind of field. You want to kind of make a lateral move that your CV doesn't reflect that, and you're looking at CVs and you're like, oh man, if I've only got 5 seconds to impress a recruiter with that CV, and my work experience is obviously in this field, but they want to move to this field, then what I would say is use your networking, use your LinkedIn, and use it as a portfolio of how you're moving in that direction. I think you guys have already had a session on telling a career story. Make your LinkedIn reflect that career story with what you're posting, the content you're interacting with, and resharing, because all of that activity tells a story on your LinkedIn. So a recruiter like myself is always checking people's LinkedIn to see what they're doing, to see if it makes sense in our mind. Okay, moving along to the icing on the cake. These are just little things that you can do, and I would say at the moment, when the candidate pool is quite strong, it's more important than ever to do these. If you're the star candidate, if you've got no no dramas getting jobs, any job you apply to, you're going to get called back because your experience is really good, then you don't necessarily need to worry about these things, and that's totally fine. It doesn't make you a bad person. If you've got recruiters reaching out to you all the time, then again, maybe not necessary. But these little things, they do help in the process. They do help leave just a positive sentiment in the recruiter's mind, or in the hiring manager's mind, or the business owner, or whoever you're working with. So that would be a post-application email or phone call or LinkedIn connection. So after you've applied, just send out a message. I've had a lot of really great feedback myself when I've done this, from recruiters, hiring managers, business owners, where I've just let them know that I'm interested, let them know that I'd love to connect regardless of the outcome of the role. Sometimes I've had a question about the role, sometimes I haven't, but those kind of things, again, it's just another touch point. And the second one is a pre or post interview follow-up email or feedback. So if you do get a phone call from a recruiter, a hiring manager, someone in HR, and they want to ask some questions, flick them a quick email. It only takes a couple of minutes, but that again will just leave that positive sentiment in their mind that, hey, this person is thoughtful, they're mindful, they're thinking about the process, but also they're thinking about me in that process. And the last point here is have a friendly approach in the phone calls and interviews. I know this can sometimes be a little bit tricky, because if you get a call out of the blue that for a role you applied for maybe 3 weeks ago, and they call you and they say, hey, I wanted to chat, are you available for a talk now? And you're in the office, you're thinking, oh, how do I get out of the office? How do I make sure no one hears me? How can I impress them with my experience? What was the role even that I applied for? It might have been 5 weeks ago that I applied for the role. So you've got all these things going through your mind. I would encourage you to try and just remember that it's a human on the phone call as well, and try and connect with them on a human level before you jump into your sales pitch, before you talk about the job and why you're passionate, before you jump out of the office. Ask them how they're going, ask them how their week has been. I've had some really, as a recruiter, I'm doing this all the time. I'm calling people, and sometimes awkward times, they're in the office, these kind of things. And I get some really interesting responses. I'm from Brisbane and I recruit nationally, so often I'm calling people in Melbourne and Sydney, so they see an 07 number, and when you pick up a phone call and you're skeptical about who it's going to be, so you're just like, hello, or what do you want? The amount of phone calls I've had where someone said that, they're like, what do you want? I'm like, you applied for a job with us, I'm trying to help you get that job, and they have to backpedal, and like, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I really do want the job, I'm really a good person. And don't make that mistake. Be friendly, approach the phone calls, as well as for an interview. If you have an interview, even if you have 3 people in a panel in a video interview, it can be quite intimidating. Still try and connect with them on a human level. Ask them how they're going, how their week's been. It'll help ice that cake and help you stand out. Okay, I'd love to ask another poll, and I'm going to have a quick drink while this poll goes up. But what is the most important aspect of the recruitment process, do you believe? The CV, the cover letter, the phone screen, the actual interviews, or contract negotiations, or something else? So quickly give me your thoughts on what you think matters the most. And this one I think is maybe a bit interpretive of, depends on what your situation is, depends on what your interpretation is. I don't think there's necessarily any right answer there.
Have answered, 80%. And just to remind you guys, it's anonymous, so don't be afraid to to participate in these polls.
Okay, I'd love to maybe see those results now, if that's okay, Juliana, just to see where they landed. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so 67% said the interview is the most important part. Phone screen 13%, and CV cover letter 20% again. Yeah, awesome. Interesting. I think, yeah, look, it does kind of depend on a number of different factors. My quick little comment, feedback on that, I guess, is the CV and the cover letter is your initial getting through the gatekeeper. So, after you've had a phone call from the recruiter, after a hiring manager's looked at your CV, those documents are pretty unimportant, to be honest. They don't really get much more consideration. They're just to help get you through the gate. Again, sometimes that initial phone call with the recruiter can just be to convince them that you're worth the hiring team reviewing them. So, the chances are the first person that calls you after a job, they're not the one who's going to make the decision. They're just going to pass you on to someone else to make that decision. So again, it's almost like a gatekeeper phone call. So the interview, yes, where really the crux of the decision making is happening. So great feedback there. All right, I want to talk a little bit about communication, the little things that make you a superstar. So elevator pitch behavioral questions is the first point, and then preparation, insight, and questions, and lastly, I want to share on empathy. So you might have heard this already, but I think it's worth rehashing. It's worth refreshing in your mind, especially if you are applying for jobs. If you're one of those people who's applied for 5 to 12 jobs, your elevator pitch is so important. And this is something that, you know, as I mentioned, recruiting, every phone call I get, every day I'm seeing this constantly. People have no idea what to say. I call them up, I say, look, thanks for applying for this role. Tell me, why did you apply for this job? Or tell me a bit about yourself. Basically, I give them the floor. The elevator pitch is where the recruiter or the interviewer is giving you the floor to tell you, to tell them your story. You have the mic, it's your moment of power, it's your moment to shine. And you want to be prepared for that, and you want to really grab that firmly, confidently, and nail that. So what I would do is have an elevator pitch, 30 seconds, maybe to a little bit more, 45 seconds, maybe a minute, but keep it short and snappy. Be strong, confident, and make sure you say no ums. This is my dad's rule. My dad was a teacher, and anytime I said he'd constantly tell me, don't say don't say don't say I still do it sometimes, but that's something that you can try and practice and work out of your elevator pitch. Say it with no ums. And have a clear career story in this pitch. It needs to make sense. As I mentioned, sometimes, you know, people don't always have a lateral career progression from analyst, consultant to senior consultant to manager. Like, it's not always clear cut. It's not always the same industry and you're just kind of going up. Sometimes people bounce around. I know myself, I've changed completely the industry and career trajectory I've had a number of times. So you need to be able to make that make sense in your elevator pitch when you're talking to someone. So it's not a question mark in the recruiter's mind. It's not something they're gonna ask and be curious about and have a red flag in their mind, but instead you'll give your elevator pitch and they'll say, oh, that makes total sense. You wanna quickly hit on your qualifications for the role and motivations for applying. So to give you a really quick example of this, so myself, when I applied for my role at KPMG, I'd been recruiting in an agency recruitment setting, which is quite different from an internal role. So that was something that I wanted to highlight, but also explain in the career story. And previous to my role in agency recruitment, I was doing something totally different. I was working with high schoolers, mentoring and coaching high schools in a youth work capacity and working in my church and ministry capacity. Roles that I really loved, but totally unrelated in most senses to HR and corporate recruitment. So my elevator pitch was basically that, you know what, I've been recruiting for the last 4.5 years and I'm really passionate about helping people land their dream jobs. And in an agency experience, I've had a really great opportunity to meet with a lot of great people, help a lot of great clients, but I want to have a longer lasting impact and make more of an impact on the business as well, which is why I want to move internal. And I really enjoy making a positive difference in people's lives, and my whole career trajectory has taken that direction. I see this as a great next step. So that's a little quick 30-second elevator pitch that I kind of pitched. And I had to do that actually via a one-way video interview. And me and Juliana were talking about how intimidating that can be. If you've got your video, and quick put your hands up if you've had to do a one-way video interview before. I'd be curious to know if anyone has or hasn't. Not all companies are doing that. I think you're going to see it more and more, to be honest. Yeah, thanks, Javier. I see that little emoji hand. And Crispy, yeah. I don't know about you, but personally, it was the most intimidating interview or any part of any recruitment process I've ever done, because, you know, you have a video software platform that says, we're going to ask you the question, then we're just going to start recording your video, and that's your chance. So the light goes red and you get to 30 seconds to read the question, then think of a response and then answer the response. So that can be quite intimidating. Again, that's where you need to practice your elevator pitch. And you might want to think through it a bit more about the kind of questions you're going to get asked. We'll go into that in a little bit later in this section as well. So that's, leads on to this next point of behavioral interview questions. So regardless of what job you've applied for, what interview process you've had, behavioral interview questions are almost 100% likely to be asked in the interview. And they are any kind of scenario-based questions. So when an interviewer asks, tell me about a time when you have and ... whatever that might be, managed a multi-million-dollar project, or manage a software project, or manage an infrastructure project, or dealt with difficult stakeholders. They'll ask for a scenario, and what they're looking for is something specific. So some of the feedback I hear regularly from interviewers as I'm going through the process with candidates is a big complaint from my interviewers is, they just didn't get specific about their answers. They were just answering in really broad strokes and real generalities. They say, oh yeah, I always manage my stakeholders well. I always manage all my projects to budget and to timeline. That's not what the interview wants to hear. They want to hear a specific example, a scenario where you've demonstrated what they're looking for. So the STAR method is one of the best ways for answering this. There's also another method where it just simplifies and captures situation and task in one. But basically, you're thinking about what kind of scenario, what's the situation that you face. So if you are going into interviews, start thinking about these scenarios, because if they put you on the spot, it can be hard to think back into the last 2-3 years of your experience where you've had these specific scenarios. So first one is situation. Next one is task. So think about what was the task you were trying to achieve in this situation? What was the mission? And then what was the action that you took? And that's really important. When it comes to the action, if you're answering this question, an interview question, maybe you're working in a team, and so it's okay to say we, but you need to specify what you did. The recruiter or the hiring manager, the interviewer really wants to know what you did. So you need to say, I did this, I took this action, our team accomplished this, and within that team, I did this. If you don't say that, again, you'll get that feedback that they just didn't answer the question. They couldn't give me a real scenario-based question that gave me confidence they could do this. And then finally, R stands for result. Make sure you finish with the result, and finish with that being a resounding kind of almost like a bit of a drop the mic moment where you finish and you say, man, we nailed that project, and the result was the business was able to successfully implement the new software, which resulted in a huge improvement in staff satisfaction, and revenue went up, and they made $1 million more. Whatever the result is, make sure you highlight that. If you can put a dollar figure to that, do that, or specific measurable results, then definitely do that as well. And I mentioned before, if you're going for a job and you haven't had these kind of scenario-based questions before, and maybe that's a bit alarming for you, you can actually predict the behavioral questions that you're going to get in an interview. It's not 100%, rock solid, but there's a lot of kind of generic ones that you'll hear. Tell me about a strength or a weakness that you have. But you can read through the job description. So this is a KPMG job description I've had here, but most job descriptions have a similar kind of format where they'll have an opportunity, your opportunity, the position, the requirements, and then what skills they're looking for. So they'll have, different companies call these different things. But I would read through this section here, and you can do this yourself. You can highlight what are the 3 most important things that they're looking for. Or another question might be, what are the 3 things that they're going to ask me because I don't have it in my CV? I've still got the interview, but my CV doesn't demonstrate this clearly. And sometimes your CV can't reflect things that are required in here. So you can highlight those, and then you can actually turn those into behavioral questions yourself. So say, for instance, this one, possesses exceptional problem-solving analytical skills. The question might be like this. Tell me about a time where you've demonstrated exceptional problem-solving and analytical skills, and it might be specific to the context within an IT project management environment. So that can kind of help you prepare for those questions. And the one thing I'd say too in the preparation as well, in particular for your elevator pitch, when you're practicing, go through, write it out, have your responses, but practice it and record it on video. One of the hardest things to do, I know, we've got a variety of people in this room from all different generations. Some people find video really natural. Some people find video really intimidating. But I guarantee you, if you can nail these questions, recording them on your iPhone or your phone, just sitting there, just looking at the camera, it's better than the mirror because you can go back and watch it later. And it puts more stress and pressure on you. You'll find once you hit record, I don't know about you, if it's like anyone else, once I hit record on something, my brain just goes out the window. The pressure just makes me lose my mind. I can't think properly. I can't talk properly. So that process of practicing will help prepare you for that same pressure process when you're in the interview. So I hope that helps. Okay, next point. let me take a quick breather, is smart questions. Let me get my notes up in order as well. So when you're going through the interview process, this can be right from the very first phone screening interview, or this can be in the more official face-to-face or video interview. If you want to stand out, one of the best ways to stand out is to ask smart questions. And if you have a question, by the way, I hear some noise, feel free to put your hand up or just jump in and ask that. I'm okay with that as well. But these smart questions will really help you stand out, because they're the best way to tell what the motives are of a candidate by the kind of questions that they're asking. It'll also demonstrate the kind of business acumen that you have, the kind of questions that you ask, and it'll also show that you're prepared. So when it comes to motives, what I would suggest here is don't jump straight to money. I know whenever you're going for an interview process, most companies don't have the salary clearly displayed, and I know as a candidate that really does suck. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case. A lot of it's about dealing with HR and the team and the morale and making sure that everyone's kind of on the right bandings there and there's no stress there. You know, if someone in the team sees a job advertised for more than what they're currently on, that can cause friction. I know that's part of the reasons why, but basically if your first question, when they say, hey, do you have any questions for us? Is you say, what's the salary? What's the money? That can be a little bit tricky. What I'd suggest is when you have a screening phone call, that's probably the right time to just make sure that you are in the right range there. Because obviously you don't want to waste your time or their time if it's not going to match up there. But think about the motives that your questions are asking. Ask insightful questions, smart questions that show that your motivation for joining the team is because you want to help them win. You want to help the business win. The motives aren't just all about you. What can I get out of this? What are the perks for me? What else can I get in this? How can you sweeten the deal for me? That's going to really turn the hiring team off. Next, when it comes to smart questions, demonstrate business acumen. So research the company and have a think about what are the ultimate business pain points that they might be feeling, why they're recruiting for this role, and how does this role affect the broader company bottom line? Does it have an effect on the actual sales, on the HR team? Does it affect how important is this project that this person's going to come in on? How important is that for the company? Is it like a business critical new software implementation that they're doing? Are they contracting out to their clients, and who are those clients and how does it affect them? If you can demonstrate questions that show that you're thinking through the business ramifications, that'll help you stand out as someone they can see is already in the process of succeeding in this role, because they're already asking the right questions in that process. And finally, just show that you're prepared. So research the company, have a look at what they're doing, what they're publishing online, what their LinkedIn is doing as well. If they've been mentioned in the news, those kind of things. It's amazing how many people come to interviews with little to no preparation. They have no idea about what the company's even doing. They've just seen a job and it says the right title, so they click apply, they rock up to the interview and playing catch up. It's really not the right impression you want to leave. Okay, I'm going to rest my breath a little bit and ask another poll. So when considering a new role, what matters most to you? Again, this is totally subjective. There's no right or wrong answer. I'd love to hear your input. I'd love to hear your feedback on what you think matters the most. Is career progression more important? Salary, learning and development and growth, or culture, or purpose, or the meaning of the role or organization? So take a minute. Have a think about that. I know you might need to think about that. It might depend on what season you're in, and fill that out for us.
And 2% participated. Would you like to get the results?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Juliana. Awesome. So 40% said learning and development or growth. 33% said purpose and meaning of the role or organization. 20% said culture. 7% said career progression. And 0 said salary. Wow, really interesting. Okay. Hey, Juliana, do we get the results of these polls after this? Do you know? Can we say that?
Wow, do you know the answer?
No, I think so. I think when it's closed, the results gone, unless we take a screenshot of it.
Yeah, thanks, Val. I'd really appreciate that. That's yeah, really interesting. I'd love to deep dive more into that, but thanks so much for sharing that with me. That's really interesting, I think, how the motivations, and look, I think from season to season, this does change. So I don't want anyone to feel that I'd judge them if they said salary is what's most important for them at the time being. But obviously, yeah, learning and growth is such an important thing. And I think we're seeing that more and more in trends in recruitment and how people are telling their stories is, you know, if you're not telling the story of what your company is going to do to help your staff grow and develop and keep getting sharper in their tools, then yeah, it's going to be hard for companies to recruit that best talent. Very cool. Let's keep moving forward. So nailing the unmeasurable requirements of the role. The reason I wanted to share about this is because when you see a job advert advertised, you may or may not have in that job ad some of the most crucial, some of the most important parts of that job might not even be listed. So depending on that team, that could be things like attitude, culture, values, work ethic, or even a growth mindset. These kind of things often are as important, if not more important sometimes, than the hard skills. So, you know, you might see a job description that says, you know what, we need, 3 years of project management experience in this industry or with this kind of company or with these kind of project management skills. They might have really clearly defined, certifications, Prince or Agile or Scrum or whatever that might be in there. And at the end of the day, you might have 20 people apply that have all of those same requirements. At the end of the day, if that's the case, and it's easy to see the CVs demonstrated, you can just go tick, 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 tick. The recruiter or the hiring manager or the hiring team, they're going to be talking about the next step is what are the unmeasurable requirements for this role? What are we really looking for here? And what I would say when it comes to these is in the interview process, when you're going through and asking the questions, try and find out if you can what these might be, what really matters to the company. So when it comes to humanity, again, my point, I just want to remind everyone here, it's I know it seems obvious, but people seem to just forget it or lose sight of it. We're all humans, so let's connect on a human level. Let's be human in this approach. Let's take mind of each other's emotions and thoughts and feelings. So be personable, friendly. I already mentioned that, ask the interviewer how their week's going and try and connect with them. It's also a really good way to build rapport. So, especially when we're in lockdown or non-lockdown and people in Sydney, Melbourne, different situations, sometimes it's a bit of a negative downer depending on who you're talking to, but I'd try and put a bit of a positive spin on it and just try and encourage the person on the other end of the phone call as well, so they leave feeling more lifted up at the end of it than put down. So next I would talk about the values. I think this is so important when you're researching a company. Don't forget to try and find out what their values are. Some companies make that really obvious. KPMG has it spelled out in 5 points on their website. Other companies, you might need to do a bit of a deeper dive and try and find like a mission statement or a value statement or an about section and find out what really matters to them. And if you can, when you're going through the interview process, weave those values into your responses. If you're thinking about these scenario-based questions, weave those values. You might see honesty as one of their crucial pillars of their values. When you're answering behavioral questions, make sure you talk about honesty. Make sure you talk about how you are passionate about integrity. And finally, I would say is language. This is a really good piece of advice I had from a friend of mine. So for me, moving from an agency recruitment model into a corporate Big Four internal recruitment model, I found this out really quickly, that they have a totally different terminology, a totally different language. They've got their own lingo. And in fact, all the different Big Four, all the different corporations, all the different industries have their own lingo. If you're in defense or if you're in tech or in a telco industry or in infrastructure, engineering, they've all got their own acronyms, they're all lingo, they're all terminology. You want to try and as much as you can study up for that or ask a friend who's in that industry and get some of that lingo and get familiar with it so you can talk that talk. What it does is it helps build trust. It helps them have that level of confidence that you can hit the ground running. There's no question about your capability. There's no question about whether you're able to transition from this current industry to another industry there. Does that make sense? I see some nods. Awesome. I'll keep moving on to self-sabotage. And I think when it comes to standing out, this is something that I see often. And I might just mention too, I see a lot of the people in this audience are females. So I just want to quickly shout out to the females, because I know these stats are crazy when it comes to the level of confidence women have in applying for jobs they aren't qualified for. I think it's something like a woman won't generally, statistically speaking, apply for a role if they don't meet 90% of the requirements in the role. So whereas men, if they meet 60% or less of the requirements of the role, they'll still apply for it. There's kind of that just, oh, get in and give it a go. I want to encourage you ladies to really put yourself out there and have a go. And really, I know, men, some of the challenges you have are totally unique. Men don't have any of the same challenges in terms of what the questions we get asked, sometimes even in the interview process, which is not really legal, about, you know, what your family plans are, things like that shouldn't be part of any recruitment process. So I just want to encourage you to really stick up for yourself in that process. If you hear people doing the dodgy, feel free to call it out. I see a lot of people do that on LinkedIn, and it really holds companies to a higher account. But again, don't let yourself be the person who holds you back. If you see a role that is your dream role, then apply for it with confidence, talk to the recruiter with confidence, and really go for it and try and tell that career story. And don't let yourself be the worst enemy. Don't hold yourself back. I really love this quote from, oh, my quote's gone, from Winston Churchill. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm, especially when we talk about recruitment and trying to get a job. If you're going for a job, if you're like 90% of people in the world, you're going to get rejected probably 90% of the time. And I know what it's like when you get those rejection emails, you know, and it's just, makes your heart sink. You're like, oh, I didn't get that job. Oh, I didn't get that job. Or maybe even worse, you go through the phone calls, you go through the interviews. I had one last year where I went through 3 interviews, met the CEO, like really great conversations, really excited about the role. Then yeah, Friday afternoon I get the call, I didn't get the role. It's like, oh, it's almost like a bit of a breakup with it feels like you've been in a short-term relationship with someone and they've just broken up and broken your heart. What I want to encourage you is don't let those things hold you back. Don't let them lose your own confidence because you didn't get that role. It's been really interesting. It's been a really great experience for me last year, getting a number of rejections. I went through a season where I had just rejection after rejection after rejection, and seeing some of the companies that rejected me too. It's been quite interesting where I've landed and how my approach hasn't changed. But I just want to encourage you, don't let those rejections hold you back. Don't let yourself be someone who holds you back. And even in the recruitment process too, I'd encourage you, don't doubt yourself too much. When you might have a really senior interview coming up. You might have an aptitude test or something. For me, again, a personal story, when I had the aptitude test for KPMG, I psyched myself out of it. I did a bit too much Google research, I think, and did some practice tests, and really psyched myself out of this and thought, oh no, I'm going to flunk this whole thing, and had a whole weekend of just panicking about this thing. And then I did a test and it was really nothing to be worried about. So just want to encourage you, don't psych yourself out in this process. Don't lose your confidence just because of the way that things are panning out at the time. All right, on that point of self-sabotage and knowing yourself, I just want to share this quick culture differentiator. I think when it comes to knowing the kind of company you want to work for, and we saw this in the poll, a large majority of you, the most important part of joining a new company was the culture, the company culture. And I hear everyone that I talk to says, I want to join a company with good culture, with great culture. But at the end of the day, everyone's definition of what a good culture is totally subjective to how they work. So I think Juliana's going to send this PDF out to you guys afterwards. I'd encourage you to go through this cultural differentiator. These are sliders, by the way. So I find, you know, no culture is super clearly cut usually. There's somewhere on a spectrum of a slider of different values. So here's a couple of these, and what I would like you to do initially is think about yourself. What do you feel most comfortable in? A really corporate environment where everything's, you know, clearly defined. You've got a clear start time, a clear end time. When work is off, you have nothing to do with work. Everyone is dressed for work. It's really clear cut. Or do you like a more informal approach where you can rock up in your ripped jeans and your sneakers to work and a t-shirt, and it doesn't matter so much about, you know, you don't have to be there right at 9 o'clock. You can rock up at 9:30. You can jump back on the computer later at 7:30 and no one really cares as long as you're getting the job done. Or what's the company built for? Or what are you built for? What do you matter most about? Profit, money, your finances? Like, do you need to keep progressing in that area, or purpose? Are you wanting to make an impact? Next one is structure and autonomy. Do you like a really structured workplace with clear set policies and procedures? Or do you like the ability to be more autonomous and you're given a long-term goal and they say, look, however you reach that goal, you go for it and you do it, and we'll back you, and as long as you get the job done? Or do you like working independently and you love to just get in your zone, put on your headphones and just smash out your work? Or do you like working more collaboratively and chatting with the team and sitting next to someone, or having a constant chat with the Slack with your teammates and just chatting and being more collaborative in that approach? Or stability or agility? What do you prefer most? Do you prefer having a company that has a long, stable company? Or do you like being able to adapt and quickly change and pivot depending on what's happening in the market, what's happening in the industry? And finally, logic-driven or creatively driven? What drives you? Do you love to just look at the numbers and the data and the analytics and have a clear pathway in that terms? Or do you like getting a bit creative and brainstorming different approaches? And that, when I say creative, I don't mean, are you a designer? What I mean is, do you like finding creative ways to solve problems that no one else has thought of? Do you like to innovate and continue to iterate in those different senses? So what I would encourage with this is go through and indicate, mark to yourself, so you have a bit of self-awareness into what you really would thrive in. And then when you're going through the interview process or you're assessing different companies to work for, try and map out where you think those companies are and where their culture really sits. And I've already talked about the video tips, I guess, initially. If you've got those one-way videos, it can be hard, but definitely practice. Most of our interviews at the moment are unlikely to be face-to-face for who knows how long. But quick little tip on with those video interviews, you're probably all totally apt with that, but just try and make sure that you're got your basics down pat. Internet connection, video, and microphone. If those aren't working, it's just gonna make things really tricky, make things really difficult. Don't forget things like lighting tips. I often see people with looking down at their phone that they're holding shakily or whatever. Doesn't give the best perception. I think it's totally fine to do an interview on your phone, but I'll just try and sit it up on a bookshelf or something so it's stable. A quick little tip on that is have it landscape. If you're doing a phone interview and you have your phone sitting in portrait, then I've done this a couple of times where it just makes the person's nose really big. So I've got a big 4K monitor that I'm sitting on, and I saw just a massive big 4K picture of someone's nose because they had their phone like this and it just zoomed in to fill up this portion of their face. I was able to fix it myself on the way I adjusted, but that was the default and it was a bit interesting. So I just encourage you with that one, just have it on landscape unless you're doing a mobile to mobile FaceTime or something like that. I had another question for the chat that I wanted to ask you guys. What do you think the most common CV mistakes or myths are? I'd love to hear your responses here, because I hear some really interesting stuff in the market, being in the industry, some stuff on LinkedIn that I see, some YouTube advice, even a lot of stuff on TikTok. I hear some really interesting advice about people making mistakes in their CV. A lot of it's not really true. A lot of the way people think that CVs interact with applicant tracking systems isn't true. A lot of the things that people say recruiters are looking for also isn't true. But I'd love to hear, what do you think the most common CV mistakes or myths are? So feel free to drop those in the chat. And I will, needs to be max 2 pages. Thanks, Val. Yeah, that's a great one. I hear that often. I would say, quickly addressing that one, I'd say definitely you do want to keep your CV short. but it doesn't necessarily have to be only 2 pages. If you have it well laid out and well spaced, then I would prefer to see a CV in 3 pages over a squished, cramped 2-page CV. I think the key with having it to more than 2 pages is you need to make sure 5 seconds. Think of the 5-second rule. The recruiter needs to be able to scan and get the most info they need out of it within 5 seconds. And then if they want to do a deeper dive, they can go through and quickly find that right information. So if you're going to have it 3 or 4 pages, make sure in that first page, you're answering everything the recruiter has in their initial questions. Keywords, awesome. Not scannable, yeah, definitely. Not tailoring for the role description. Buzzwords to hit the robot. Adding a picture. The interviewer cares about every job project you've ever had. Yeah, great. Include all experiences, even if they're not relevant to the role. Yeah, great, awesome. I love these points. What are the most common CV mistakes? Yeah, great. What I would say on that is definitely Mustafi's. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Mustafi's great point on keywords. Keywords are so important in your CV. And I see, every now and again, I see a candidate do a really good job of, basically, they're making my life easier. Like I said, I'm hundreds of CVs I'm flicking through a day and scanning these CVs. Some people make it really difficult for me to realize that they're actually the best candidate in that applicant pool. It just makes it really hard for me to find that info, because what I'm looking for is, recruiters try and keep things quite simple. So 5 things max, most likely 3 things. I'll take a brief from a hiring manager. They'll tell me what they're looking for. And then at the end of that, I'll often say, look, what's the most 3 important things that you're looking for? If we boiled all of this down, this hour-long conversation about the role, what are the 3 most important things that I need to look for? Then those are what I'm looking for in the CV. If I don't see them straight away, I just can't progress that candidate, because those are the 3 most important things. But if that candidate has those 3 most important things in bold under their name, I don't even need to go any further. I can just straight away say, yep, I'll give them a call to go in a deep dive and talk about that more later. So keywords, 100%. Not scannable, Nathaniel, great point. I think a CV needs to be scannable. 100% has to be scannable. I might even change page here just quickly, so you can have a look at 2 different examples of 2 different CVs. I've got this one here because it's really not scannable. There's just a lot of text, a lot of bulk text. Oh, there are some dot points there. But if you compare these CVs, this CV on the right is so much easier to scan and quickly see what their work experience is, their skills, their education, software certifications, and their job title. Really scannable, really quick and easy to see those things within 5 seconds. Whereas here I'm gonna have to go through, I'm gonna have to read these sentences, which is just a lot slower process. I can still scan for keywords, but it's quite difficult to read. And on tailoring for the role description, I think, Javier, that's a really great point. Again, it can be a bit difficult for people that are time poor and people that are really just trying to find work and make a living. But what I would suggest is, if you look at, John Smith's example here, under his name, he's got IT project manager. So if the only thing you're going to tailor in a CV is this title here, then do that. Have, maybe 5 or 6 different titles or words or keywords there. IT project manager, Scrum certified, Prince certified, Agile coach, Scrum master, whatever that is, whatever those keywords are, put them loud and proud at the very top. Doesn't have to be under the work experience. And again, I think someone else said you don't have to have all of your experience in there. 100% you don't have to. You can feel free to leave off any jobs that aren't relevant. They can click onto your LinkedIn, or they can ask you if there's any gaps. That's totally fine. Yeah, definitely the interviewer doesn't care about every job or project you've ever had. Yeah, awesome. Great point, Michelle. Kylie, question. So can you give us tips for the best CV? Yeah, great question. I hear a lot of debate about things like pictures and colors. I hear some interesting stuff where people say 100% has to be black and white, has to be no picture, has to be 100% professional. Look, I don't think that's true. Again, I'm reviewing hundreds of CVs every single day. As long as it's still professional, as long as it's still visible, there's nothing wrong with a bit of color. There's nothing wrong with a photo in there. As long as, and this does depend from person to person and company and industry, even country to country. Some countries have it as a 100% has to be in there. Other people say, yeah, definitely don't put it in there. But look, my rationale for this is LinkedIn is the most popular in the world platform for sharing your digital CV. And LinkedIn has a photo. So I think there's nothing wrong with having a photo in your CV. If you do that, look at LinkedIn's proportions. I see some people put like almost a half of their first page as their photo. Don't do that. That's a bit awkward. Have a small little photo in there if you want to put your photo in there. I think it's a great idea personally. Again, I think it makes it more personal, but you know, each to their own. Some people don't like it. I'll jump back to Paige to this common CV mistakes because I think Kylie asked that question. So common CV mistakes that I do see, no LinkedIn profile attached. So this one was actually interesting for me. It wasn't one of the first things that would have come to my mind straight away, but according to some research done by Resume Go, job applicants who included a comprehensive LinkedIn profile on their resumes received a callback rate of 13.5%, which is 71% higher than a callback rate if they didn't have any LinkedIn profile or a bare bones profile. So definitely make sure your CV has your LinkedIn profile at the very top of your CV. And if you can make it a hyperlink so it's easy to click, all the better and easier for a recruiter to quickly view your LinkedIn. And again, a point, make that LinkedIn really tell a strong, compelling story. Don't just have a bare bones LinkedIn with no photo, no back screen, and nothing, no detail under your jobs, no about me section. Use LinkedIn is actually really good now, especially if you're a project manager. If you can pull together any kind of case studies or any kind of experience that you've had or companies you've worked for or clients that you've project managed for, try and put some of that rich text in there, photos, documents, stuff like that on your LinkedIn profile if it's legal to do so and you're not, it's not confidential. But common CV mistakes, education at the top. Look, unless you've just graduated from uni, don't have your education at the top. No one really cares, to be honest. Sorry to say that. I know you spend a lot on your uni education. But once you've got your entry-level job, once you're in the industry, it doesn't really matter where you studied, what your bachelor was. Often if you're doing a master's, that's a really great way to help you stand out. If you're going above and beyond, or maybe you've got a dual bachelor, that can be handy as well. Maybe that can help push you above. But look, your career experience, your work experience is much more important. And again, your most recent experience. Make sure that if I said that here, make sure that the ordering is right in terms of reverse chronological experience. So your most recent job should be the first thing they see in your experience section. Don't have too much bulk text. Again, I really like the example of LinkedIn. If you look at your LinkedIn profile or a LinkedIn profile that's really filled out, it's really easy to see at a snapshot what the last 3 to 5 jobs are. They don't have too much text in there, but you can actually click to expand to see more. I know you can't do that in a CV, but don't have too much bulk text. Don't make it too squashed and don't have no white space in there. White space is okay. It's okay to have a bit of white space in there. You don't want to, half of your page to be empty. But again, you want it to be scannable. You want it to be easy to be flicked at and a recruiter to be able to look at it in a small window without having to zoom right in because you've made the font so small. Don't do that. Go over the page if you need to go over the page. It's totally fine. Definitely that point on keywords, which we already addressed. So look at the job description. If you're in an industry that's, maybe you're in defense, it's all about those defense clearances. So make sure you have that defense clearance at a key point, maybe directly under your name, this level security clearance. Or if you're going for a project management role that requires a certain certification, make sure that's clearly visible, really bold, straight under your name, just so the recruiter doesn't have to search halfway through your roles or down to the bottom of your page, those kind of things. And that's where I would say maybe education might be appropriate if it's a role that does require, these certificates or these certifications. Professional summary, look, I would say 90% of the time, it's really not needed. Again, unless you're changing industry and unless you know that they're going to be scratching their head saying, look, why are you applying for this role? You were quite senior in your previous roles. You were head of the whole project delivery, and now you're applying for a role that's less than that. There could be a number of reasons why that makes total sense for you. You might want to put that in a professional summary, but most of the time, again, not needed. A recruiter's mind's going to jump straight to what's your current job. What are you doing right now? What was your last job? And what are your skills? Those are the first things they're going to jump to. And no software or technical keywords clearly visible. These will be really important. What kind of project management experience, software have you used previously? Has the job specifically asked for these certain softwares? Make sure that's in your CV. I think that's all I needed to share. I quite like how this is laid out, even though he does have a professional summary here. I haven't generated this one, by the way. This is just one that I found online that I do like. But see his bolded things there. So I would say definitely do that. If you're applying for a job that said 10 years experience needed, 10 plus years experience needed, then make sure you highlight 10 years experience in IT department management. Those kind of things, like really bold, easy again for the recruiter to see. And that's it, I think. I don't think I had anything else. Let me just quickly see. Oh, there's some other questions in there. Name and contact details instead of top body. Val or Juliana, feel free to jump in if I missed any of those questions about the CVs.
I think the first question was from Kelly. Kylie.
And what was that? Sorry, Juliana, can you read it?
Is there any etiquette around connecting with the recruiter or company while the recruitment process is going on?
I think definitely to connect. Different companies will handle this differently. I know a lot of companies, a lot of HR departments or recruitment departments like to keep all of that in the recruitment rather than, if you have an interview with someone, they might be the hiring manager for that role. And you might try and reach out to them on LinkedIn. They might push you back and say, hey, look, please talk to a recruiter because, I can't deal with all of the volume of inquiries. So that might happen. But look, definitely reach out to them still. No harm in still trying to connect with them. Sometimes if you're trying to get feedback following on from an interview, I would say try and reach out to the recruiter or the HR team rather than that hiring manager. Yeah, feel free. Oh, sorry. I've just realized there was one more point that I did want to make on your first unscheduled interview. I've already addressed some of those points, but just really quickly, quick shout out. When you do get a phone call from the first person to reach out to you from that job, whoever that is, make sure that you're prepared for that as best as you can be. And here's my quick point. You might be in the office. Your boss might be sitting right next to you. Don't feel like you need to fluster and still keep that phone call going. Just request a call back at a more convenient time. And then that might give you time to look at the job and remind yourself what you actually applied for. Be prepared with your elevator pitch and make it make sense because, that really is your first chance to make a good, positive impression on that hiring team. So make sure that you nail your first unscheduled interview because that's the phone call from a recruiter most likely in most cases. Okay, let's jump back to questions. So sorry, Juliana, I'll let you shoot some questions at me if that's okay. I've got this chat window open, but I know I've missed plenty.
Okay. Can you give us your tips for the best CVs? I think you covered that. This was from Kylie.
Yeah, I think I've covered that one.
You've covered that. Thanks, Hoops.
Yeah, no, all good.
Question from Val. What about putting your name and contact details in the header instead of the top part of the body? Is that a good or bad idea?
Look, I think it doesn't matter, to be honest. Name and contact details, phone number, your contact details need to be in your CV and it needs to be easy to find. Doesn't matter whether it's at the top or if it's at the bottom or if it's the side. I don't think it matters. As long as said it's not. If you've got a 4-page CV, don't put it at the bottom of that 4 pages. You want someone to easily click on your CV and say, oh, I love this person. I want to call them straight away. Oh, they haven't attached a phone number. You wouldn't believe how many people make such a rookie mistake in that sense. But yeah, that's my answer to that one.
The next one is from Shao. Are most of the companies use some sort of software to scan CV? That's why keywords are so important to stand out. I think this goes back to ATS.
Sorry, can you read that question again?
Yeah. So, do most of the companies use some sort of software to scan the CV? Is that why keywords are so important to stand out?
Yeah, great question. Look, it does depend. I think when it comes to myths, a lot of the myths around how much artificial intelligence and robots and ATSs are doing, a lot of that's not necessarily accurate. Look, in terms of where recruitment's going and how software is playing a part in artificial intelligence is filtering, it is definitely coming in more and more. A lot of applicant tracking systems will try and pass your CV and suck that into their own system so they can present it to a recruiter in a more consistent format. So in that sense, the way that you lay out your CV can be quite important. You don't want to have like tables in there. You definitely don't want to have your CV saved as like a JPEG or a PDF that can't be scanned. You know, when you save a Word document to a PDF, you can still scan that text. You can still copy and paste all the text in that. That's totally fine. There's no dramas with that. I think most of the filtering that's done is still going to be done by a human. It's going to be done by a recruiter like me, and the top three things they're going to filter are the logistics, the salary expectations, the location, and the working rights. So straight away, if you don't meet those requirements, that's going to be the first thing a recruiter's just going to bunch everyone into that category that doesn't fit within the salary or the location or the working rights, and they're going to instantly dismiss you and they won't look at your CV. Doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter your experience. If you can't meet the basic logistics, they'll filter you straight away. And then the next thing they might look at, depending on what the software is like, they can filter by a keyword. So they can, type in, say for instance, if we're doing a project management one that's waterfall methodology, they might search for waterfall methodology, but that's usually not dismissing people. That's usually filtering people to look at first. So that'll search your CV and it'll look for that word in waterfall and it'll pop up maybe, 10 out of the 50 people have that in their CV. So that'll be who they'll prioritize. So everyone that doesn't have that probably will get dismissed if that's one of the top three things that they're looking for. But it depends. So again, most of the filtering will be done by a human who will kind of narrow down. Basically, our recruiter's job is to get that funnel to keep going down and down and down and down. So we want a large applicant pool. We want a lot of people to apply. So we've got all the best candidates, but our job is to whittle that down and then basically present to the hiring team, look, here's the 5 best people who've applied. This is why they're so good. You should interview all of them. And then their job is to make that decision. Out of these 5, we've interviewed them and this person's best for the job. So I hope that helps answer that question. Feel free to turn your mic on and ask for clarification if I didn't fully answer that about the software and artificial intelligence.
Thanks, Michael. Because I worked with a resume writer before, and she said to me, most of the CVs now are scanned by some sort of software, and I did have my doubts, but I'm not a specialist in recruiting field, so I could only go along with her, and then she helped with tailoring my resume, but I just still had the doubts, and you are here today, so I thought I'd clear the mystery. And also when you mentioned about table, I found when she did my CV, she used some sort of format that it's not very easy to revise by myself. And to me, that worries me. What if it's actually scanned by sort of software, whether it could be picked up or not? So yeah, but they're just my doubts. And thank you for clearing everything.
Yeah, great. Look, I'll just say in this group too, don't stress too much about that. If it is in a format that is a bit, if the applicant tracking system can't handle it too well, don't stress too much. Recruiters, we're used to that. No recruitment software is incredible. They all kind of have their own faults. So we're used to dealing with those faults. We're used to candidates not uploading the right format for our software. So we're used to manually finding the CV and still just putting our eyeballs onto it. So don't stress too much about, a robot dismissing you. It's not likely to happen.
Good tip, Michael. So Patrick said he found a cover letter template that uses columns that he can align requirements on the left to his experience on the right. Is this a mistake?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find these questions that you're reading from.
Do
Whereabouts?
you want me to repeat?
Yeah, can you repeat that, sorry?
Yeah, so Patrick found a cover letter template that uses columns. And that aligns requirements on the left against his experiences on the right. So pretty much a table.
Yeah.
And he's asking if this is a mistake for cover letter.
Yeah, really interesting. I think I've seen that once or twice. So I don't think it's very common. So great question, Patrick. I don't think it's a mistake. I think it could be, yeah. Again, anything you can do to make our job, the hiring team's job, easier in assessing your suitability for the job, I think is a great idea. On cover letters, though, I will say just don't get too caught up on spending all of your time and effort in really tailoring every single cover letter for the job. That would be my advice. Like, you can definitely do it, and sometimes it will really help you stand out. But I would probably say, like, this is just me pulling a figure out of the air, but 70% of the time your cover letter won't get read at all. And that sucks because you can't necessarily just not put a cover letter on, because I know some hiring teams will say, look, they didn't even submit a cover letter. They're not even putting any effort. Let's skip to someone else who put in the effort. So it is very unfair for the candidate in that sense. But yeah, look, cover letters are a tough one. If you've got something that you've got a template for, I think that's a great idea. Try and do a quick little modification of that so it is tailored for every job, but try and keep it easy and don't make it too time intensive of yourself.
Thank you, Michael. What are your tips for what to do and for what not to do after a really good and final interview?
Yeah, great question. I think, Javier, my hope is that after a really good final interview, hopefully the recruitment team will give you some sort of indication in terms of what you're getting your expectations right, in terms of how long they'll take to get back to you. Look, unfortunately, what I would say is add on probably 3 days to the estimate they give you. They might say, oh, we'll get back to you in 1 week. Add on an extra 3 days, and that's probably more likely in terms of when they'll get back to you. Hiring teams are usually very busy and can be quite slow to get back to people, which is really unfortunate as a candidate. But definitely, look, I think make sure you follow some of those tips that I shared already. So follow up that final interview. If you've got the email address of the person who interviewed you, or you find them on LinkedIn, send them a message, make it personal, reiterate your interest in the role, and share something about the interview specifically that made you more excited about the role. So maybe in the interview, ask some questions about what are the key pain points for the company at the moment, and they might have shared some of their pain points. You can bring that up in that follow-up email or LinkedIn message and say, hey, look, in the interview, I was really excited to hear that these are pain points because I'm passionate about fixing those, and I believe I could really do a great job. So it's almost like another little sales pitch, but don't get too salesy. Keep it kind of personal. Be appreciative of their time. Keep it fairly short, but say, look, really looking forward to hearing back about next steps. I would say, yeah. And then follow up. Definitely follow up with the hiring team. If they don't get back to you in a week, I would say anything more than a week is definitely warrants a phone call from you to call out to whoever's number you have, or email to follow up. Like I mentioned, sometimes in this industry, people just get really busy. For myself, I'm recruiting, about 30 different roles. So I'm dealing with 30 different hiring teams, hundreds and hundreds of candidates in that process. So I try and keep as best I can to keep making sure I'm giving everyone feedback as all the way across so that everyone's communicated to. But sometimes, man, people just might get left longer than I've estimated that it'll take me to get back to them. So if someone calls me or emails me, I actually appreciate that, because it shows that they're still interested, they're still thinking about it, and it helps me because, sometimes I might have just missed something due to my own emails getting a bit behind, backlogged. Hopefully that helps.
I think this is from me, just following this question from Javier. Is I always found difficult when all the communication with the recruiter is via email, and then when you are in the final stage, I just found like, shall I really call? They're so busy. They've been replying all the emails, like they've been so responsive. But right now, I want the answer. Time is going by, so you definitely, as a recruiter, this wouldn't be a problem to give a call.
Yeah,
even though no phone calls have been in the process.
I don't think it's a problem at all. Definitely call them. You might want to email them first, because then you can, because with recruiters, I guess we've got, like literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that we're communicating with on a weekly basis. So you might say, oh, hey, it's Juliana here. And the recruiter's scrambling, thinking, Juliana, what's the job number you applied for? What's the role position in there? Trying to figure out where you lie and everything. So sometimes if you send an email first and say, hey, just following up, I'd love to hear if you've heard anything from the hiring team. Then you can call them and say, hey, I just sent you an email, just inquiring about this role that I applied for. I'd love some feedback, or the final interview was really positive. And I think calling is great because a recruiter wants you to win. They want the candidate to get the job as soon as possible. They want the hiring team to make the decision as soon as possible, because that means for us it's a win. So definitely call them. I think that's totally fine, but just maybe help them, give them some context about who you are, what job you applied for, and what your inquiry is about, so they can find all that. They'll probably have to dig up their notes and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Oh, good.
Question from Susan is, if you change your CV to match each role you apply, wouldn't the recruiter be able to see the different wording on your LinkedIn? Good question.
Great question, Susan. Yeah. Look, I think this is a really great question. What I'd caution here is definitely integrity, honesty, but also feel free to tell your story in a truthful way that makes sense for you, but also for the hiring team. So look, there's a lot of roles that are kind of interchangeable. So my title at KPMG is National, Talent Acquisition Consultant for Strategy and Operations. But if I put on my CV, I'm a recruiter, or I'm a technical recruiter, or my previous role was career advisor. Like, a lot of titles are kind of interchangeable, and you might have something different on your email signature than is on your LinkedIn. Sometimes that's totally okay. Obviously, that could be taken way too far. If you're a project coordinator and you say, that you're a project manager, or you're a project director, something like that, just a obvious lie. And LinkedIn kind of shows that you're really trying to up-talk yourself way more than you actually were, then that's going to make a really bad impression if you're trying to do that and that's obvious. But I think, if you can even put in, maybe if you're scared about doing something that might not seem 100% honest, you can put something in brackets. So say for instance, you're a project coordinator in a tech company, but you're also managing daily stand-ups, and you're doing a bit of Scrum coaching, Scrum management stuff as well. That you can put that in brackets, that you are unofficial Scrum Master as well. Something like that, like you can tell that story. Does that make sense, Susan?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, that was one of my things at the back when you said you need to tailor it. Sometimes the responsibilities that you are playing in your current role, some of them might need to be higher than others that you are playing, because they feed well into the role that you're applying for. So things like that. As a recruiter, if you've seen those differences, do you just ignore those differences?
Look, I think different people can go about it different ways. What I would suggest is your LinkedIn should probably stay as consistent as possible. So, you don't want to be changing your LinkedIn job requirements, job title, like job responsibilities every month when you're applying for a different job. Keep your LinkedIn the same and have that maybe most generic, most broad. And then your CV, you can chop and change. So if we look at these CV tips, these 5 dot points under each job description, what you might want to do is you might want to have a master template CV where you have 20 points under each title here. And then, you know, depending on what you see in the job advert, it might say it only needs these 3 things. Then you chop out everything else because it doesn't matter, and you only put those 3 things in there. Or you just put the keywords. I was the Scrum coach, or I was the waterfall project manager, or I was working in agile format. Whatever those kind of whatever those keywords are for that job requirement, then you just put those in. And your LinkedIn, I think it's good to have that to be the same, but the LinkedIn might have more, or it might be more generic. And that's totally fine. I think, you know, recruiters expect that. They expect some tailoring. But yeah, be somewhat aware that recruiters are also looking at your LinkedIn to check to see if you're being dishonest, to see if you are trying to upsell yourself more than you should be.
Makes sense. Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
No, all good.
Michelle is asking how to ask for feedback from recruiters and hiring managers if unsuspectful for the role.
Yeah, great question, Michelle. Look, I love it when people ask me for feedback. A lot of people don't. I know a lot of people are, to be honest, asking for feedback is one of the hardest things you do on a daily, like whether that's in your current role, asking for feedback from your manager or feedback from senior stakeholders. But yeah, if you get rejected, asking for feedback can be a pretty hard thing to do, but definitely do it. It is one of the best things that, you know what, at the end of the day, standing out, it helps you stand out in the recruiter's mind. It helps you stand out in the hiring team's mind if you are asking for feedback genuinely, because you might not have got the job. Someone might have been more qualified or had more years experience. But I love it when people ask me for feedback, partly because I love giving advice, but you find that most people are like that. Most people love giving advice. They love being the expert at something. So, you know, if you went for your dream job and you didn't get it, you might have got a really brief, high-level summary feedback from the recruiter who said, oh, you weren't successful, you were really great, but someone else had more years experience. I think it's totally appropriate to even go to the person that you interviewed with and say, hey, look, thanks so much for interviewing me. I didn't get the job this time around, but I did want to ask you as well for any additional feedback that can help me to grow for next time. And people love giving advice. And then, you know what, in a month's time when they have another position open, then hopefully you're first in their mind too as a best candidate for this, for the new role that comes up.
What if a role doesn't have a closure? Not a role, so recruitment process doesn't have a closure.
As in like an end date on the job applications?
There's no closure. The process has been great, positive interviews, good feedbacks. There's no closure. The recruiter ghosts.
Yeah, I think chase them.
Emails, you try to call and you don't get a response. So I think the applicant gets the feeling it didn't go well. But what do you recommend when there's no closure?
Yeah.
Do you think you just move on?
Yeah, I think it is a hard one. I think in a perfect world that should never happen. Every candidate should get clear communication. I think in my perfect world, I'd love to have like way more transparency so a candidate can see exactly where they are at in the process. They can see how many other people are in that same process with them, so who they're going up against. That way they can set their expectations right. As I kind of mentioned, I had that disappointment when I thought I met with the CEO. I was like, oh, surely this is going to be the last stage. I must be nearly there. And then it didn't happen, so I had wrong expectations. So it can be really difficult. I think in a perfect world, you should know exactly where you're at. You should have perfect clarity. At the moment, what I'd say is follow up with the recruiter, the hiring team, so you can get some feedback. It's their responsibility to give that to you. They owe that to you, especially if you've gone for an interview. Then you've invested time into this process. So the business has a responsibility to get back to you. What I would, depending on how you want to take this, I'd reach out to the recruiter directly. If they don't get back to you, if they do ghost you, feel free to contact the company like through a info email or an admin email and say, hey, look, I've tried to talk to this person, but I haven't heard back. I would really love to hear where I'm at. That can sometimes just be like a little escalation point, just to say, hey, look, yeah, maybe I didn't get this job, but I just want to know. And that's a fair requirement. You're not being unfair in that sense. But look, I think if you haven't heard back, probably don't keep your heart on that. Keep moving forward. But you never know as well. Sometimes companies are just really slow. I was chatting with, so one of KPMG's service offerings is we do human-centered design, and one of my colleagues is doing a human-centered design at a certain government agency, and they're talking about recruitment. Their recruitment process is they post the job they need, and then I think it's something like 4 months later, someone will give them a phone call, and they call that phone call an availability phone call to see if that person's still on the market 4 months after they applied, because that's how long it's taking for them to get back to candidates after they've applied. So some companies are just really inefficient in their recruitment. So they might have someone apply, a month later give a phone call, 2 weeks later have an interview, and then 4 weeks later they might decide, oh, we want to do a second round interview because, you know, maybe a candidate's dropped out, maybe the recruitment got paused, maybe there were budget restraints. So sometimes, you know, you never know. I've talked to candidates before where, they've thought that the job's been closed or been filled, and then they found out, oh, we're actually still keen to keep progressing with you. But, you know, if you want to kind of speed the process along, sometimes you can say, look, I'm actually meeting with another company as well, one of your competitors, so I'd just love to hear where my feedback is. So if I do get another offer, if I should wait, let me know. I'm happy to put them on hold to wait for you guys, because you are my preference. Something like that can kind of make them feel, oh, there's a sense of urgency. I need to chase up that hiring team. They still haven't given me feedback, so that can sometimes generate a bit of urgency. Again, I'd encourage you to be honest there and don't just say that for the sake of it. But yeah, it can be a tricky one.
Thank you. Do companies use historical tracking of an applicant if applied earlier and rejected for a different position? I think you covered that, but would you like to elaborate? This was from Mustafa.
Yeah, great question, Mustafiz. Yeah, most likely they do. It depends when you go into... So when you click apply, I'm imagining on Seek or LinkedIn, depends what company you're applying for. Sometimes you just click apply on Seek and it'll apply straight away. Sometimes you click apply on Seek or LinkedIn, it'll take you to their company's recruitment page. You can often look, where am I? I can't really show you on my screen, but you can often see up in the top hand, if you look at the URL bar, you'll see, often you'll see a name like Workday or PageUp or JobAdder or some other software name when you click on that page. And that's the kind of applicant tracking system that they're using to host their applicants. So if they have one of those kind of applicant pages and you have to set up a login to apply for the role, definitely they can see all of your history of when you've applied. They can see it right on your candidate profile. So yeah, I think that is really clearly visible. I'd love to maybe ask a follow-up question for you in terms of what motivates that question. Like, are you worried about seeing how many roles you've applied for with their company, or why you were rejected for that company maybe? That can be an interesting question. What I find interesting sometimes is if I see a candidate who I can see in the last month has applied for 6 different roles in KPMG, and they're all like random. There's no clarity in them. They're just applying for anything and everything. I can tell pretty much straight away they're not going to be relevant for this role. I'll still look at their CV and see if they're relevant, but 90% of the time they're not relevant because it just gives them an indication that they're just looking for anything. A recruiter or a hiring team, basically they want to know that it's a funny one. I kind of use the analogy, it's almost like The Bachelor. You guys know The Bachelor TV show? I hate it. My wife loves it. She watches it and sometimes I can't not listen to it. But it's so unfair. They got, how many, 12 girls all dating this one guy, and this one guy will have these conversations with the girls and he'll say, I just feel like you're not giving me your whole heart. Like, I feel like you're holding back. And the girl's like, well, I kind of am holding back because you're dating 11 other girls at the same time and you're probably going to reject me in the next rose ceremony. But the guy still expects her to give her the whole heart so he can decide who he wants to go with. It's kind of like that in the recruitment process. The hiring team say, well, we want to be the only job you're applying for. We want to be the only company that you're thinking about. We want to be the only role that you're working for. But that's just not the reality. But sometimes that's the perception in a sense. So when you're applying for a role, you kind of want to make that team, that recruiter or that hiring manager seem like, oh, you know, you're my number one preference. But at the same time, you're sneakily going out and having all these other conversations as well, because of course you are. It's your career that's more important. Bit of a long-winded answer,
Michael?
but hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah, we have a few more questions. I would like to continue. We have
Yeah, go for it.
15 minutes ago. Javier is asking, can it be seen as a negative not having our LinkedIn profile updated?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think actually last time I did one of these PMIQ events, I chatted with someone who had no LinkedIn profile, but he had a really legitimate reason. So I would say 99% of the times, definitely you need to have a LinkedIn profile, needs to be updated. But then look, there are some cases in terms of privacy concerns. Some people, this is much more of an issue than others. So look, I think definitely if that's you, then maybe, you know, I would probably advise, you know, if there are certain privacy issues, reasons why you can't be so public about what's going on for you with your professional world, maybe clarify that with the recruiter or the hiring team or the company you're talking to, and they should be able to accommodate that totally fine. But yeah, definitely if your LinkedIn's not up to date, it just makes it confusing. When we see someone apply for us and we have question marks, maybe they're coming from a different industry, maybe the job title they had previously just doesn't make sense in our mind. Like, why would you be applying for this role? It doesn't make sense. Or if we look at your LinkedIn profile and it says that you're still at a company that you, on your CV, it says you left there a year ago and it's still not up to date, but it just makes the whole process a bit confusing, gets us skeptical. And you don't want that from a point of view. You want the recruiter to think, oh yeah, makes 100% sense, really compelling. You want us to be thinking you are the best person for this role. You got the best experience. And if we don't act quickly, we're going to lose you to one of our competitors. That's our worst fear, I guess.
Thank you, Michael. From Helena. What if I don't have any experience in the role or the exact skills they ask for, but I know I'm capable to do it, and I just need the opportunity to demonstrate them. But I don't want to lie in my resume. Is it impossible to get an interview? And she reminds, as you said, the first thing they look in your resume is your experience, which will not help in this case.
Yeah, great question, Helena. And a really tricky one because, yeah, unless you can put hard and fast details on your CV about where you've demonstrated that, it's just going to be like, sometimes you'll get a really good hiring team where they might actually still talk to you. There might be something else in your CV that has really impressed them, or maybe there's a phone number and you can actually call them and really impress them that way and convince them in a really compelling elevator pitch. But it is going to be really hard if you don't have those skills or experience that you can put down in your CV. My advice would be is not to worry so much about your CV. Try and think about how you can find opportunities to prove that you said, I just need the opportunity to demonstrate that you can do these things. Focus on that. Find opportunities to demonstrate that. The best way is commercial experience through a paid job. But obviously, you know, it's a catch-22. If you don't have that job, you can't prove that you can do it. So my advice on that is find a way that you can do that with a close family or friend or someone in your network who maybe owns a business or runs a shop or something, whatever those skills might be. So I don't know, I talk to graphic designers about this kind of thing a lot of the time, or digital marketers. I say, look, you know, you need to have experience in running Facebook ads. If you don't have experience running Facebook ads, you're never going to get a job in digital marketing. And they might say, look, my company's just old school. They only use emails. Then my advice is find your local coffee shop and ask them if you can volunteer your time, set up some Facebook ads, targeted ads, and ask them for $100 budget, and then demonstrate that. Get the reporting, get the analytics, and then put that on your CV as a freelance opportunity, as a contracting opportunity. You might not have got paid for it. You might have just got a free coffee at the end of the be but it's that experience, ability to demonstrate that experience to them. So what I would encourage you is find ways that you can do that. If you don't have a close family or friend that you can do that for, look at the startup industry. and the charity and not-for-profit space. Startups are always looking for help. They never have enough budget to do what they ideally want to do. So if someone puts up their hand and says, hey, I'm a project manager and my company's been stuck in waterfall, I get no opportunity to do any agile project management. I get no opportunity to work in any kind of scrum management, but I really am passionate about doing this. Can I volunteer with your organization for a month, 1 day a week, and run some stand-ups? Can I do some of these, whatever they might be that you're trying to add to your experience in? Can I volunteer for you, do it for a month, and I'm sure it'll help your team and help you benefit your team in terms, because I know you've been advertising for this role. That's a good way to do it, actually. You've been advertising for this role. The budget I saw on the role is really low. I'm happy to do this for free for you for a month. I want to get that experience and put you down as a reference on my CV as well, if that's okay. And Charities, again, great organizations, really purpose driven, never have enough budget to do what they want to do. So if you can come in and you want to, again, give them the assurance that you're reliable, that you're not going to take them for a ride. So you need to demonstrate still that you've either studied it on your outside, you've got a project, like a uni project or something that you can still give some kind of demonstration. But then it's that commercial experience that really matters. And as soon as you've got that, put that in your CV. If you've worked for them for a month, even if it's free, it's still work experience. You should probably clarify that it was freelancing or contracting or just work experience or internship or whatever the case might be. But yeah, definitely you can try and convince them, but at the end of the day, it's not easy to try and convince someone that you can do something unless you've already done it. So, and that's what a CV is all about, just showing what you've already done so they'll hire you to do it again, basically.
Thank you, Michael. What is your advice on selecting and prompting referees?
Yeah, great question, Javier. I think in terms of CVs too, I don't think these days you need your references on your CV. I would say that's 90% of the time the case. Most CVs I see don't have people's references on at the moment, and that's not an issue. So if you're worried about putting your references on your CV, don't be worried about it. Feel free to leave them off. If the recruiter asks for it, then what I would do is just delicately, like I'm imagining, Javier, your question is a little bit about, you're currently working somewhere, so you can't necessarily put your current manager on your reference list if you haven't told them that you're leaving, if you haven't got a job. Is that right, Javier? Feel free to jump in and clarify that for me. But right, okay, yeah.